The room is cool before dawn, and the Habsburg seal press feels heavy and smooth beneath your hand. Outside the chancery windows, Vienna is still dark, with late autumn dampness resting on the stone. You unlock the cabinet quietly, taking out wax sticks, ribbon tags, and the engraved metal matrices. Each piece has its place, and each place has been learned by repetition. A small stove warms the wax just enough until it softens without losing its shape. On the bench, tied bundles of papers wait for their red impressions, their authority still unfinished. Some will travel by courier to provincial offices, railway desks, military suppliers, and court clerks. Your work is not loud, and it is not hurried, but it must be exact. So the day begins with sorting, warming, pressing, cooling, and entering each seal into the ledger. The first thing you notice is the height of the morning tray. It sits nearer the edge than usual, because the bundles beneath it have lifted the whole stack upward. The night porter has left a note, folded once, with a thumb mark of damp ash near the corner. More papers came in after midnight, he has written, from the military supply office and the railway section. There are provincial appointments too, tied in pale tape, with names written in German, Czech, Polish, and Hungarian. You do not open them yet. You place one hand flat on the top bundle, feeling the slight spring of folded paper beneath the cord. The day has changed before it has properly begun, not in a loud way. Not in a way that anyone in the street would notice, but in this room, where every document must match the proper seal, the extra weight matters. If you begin from the top, as a tired man might, the early courier could leave with the wrong things finished, so you choose the slower beginning. You lift each bundle, read the docket, and make separate piles across the bench. One pile is for the great imperial and royal chancery seal, used only when the authority line demands it. One pile is for ministry certificates, smaller in form, often leaving by rail pouch before noon. One pile is for military permissions, which are checked twice because supply papers often move faster than explanations. One pile is for court correspondence, with folded tags already pierced through the lower margin. And one pile, always one pile, is for uncertainty. That pile is set at the far right, beside the inkstand, where your eye cannot forget it. The stove gives a soft tick as the iron expands. A blue edge of flame shows beneath the little door, then settles back to orange. You turn the wax sticks so one side does not warm too quickly. Good sealing wax is not simply melted like candle grease. It must be softened until it yields under the knife, but still holds the body needed for a clean impression. Too cold, and the seal cracks like old sugar. Too hot, and the arms blur into a shallow red puddle. You know this not from a manual, though manuals exist, but from years of small failures remembered by the fingers. The wax used here is red mostly, with its color made deeper by vermilion and other pigments. Older recipes used shellac, turpentine, resin, chalk, and coloring ground fine enough to disappear in the mixture. The sticks snap when cold, they bend when ready. This morning they are taking their time. The damp air from the stone courtyard has entered everything. It is in the paper, it is in the ribbon, it is in the wooden handles of the presses, which feel a little swollen beneath your palm. You draw the ledger closer and open it to the current date, the 21st of November, 1916. The page is ruled by hand, with columns for hour, department, document number, seal used, wax color, and dispatch note. There is a place for initials too. Those initials are small, but they carry the weight of having seen and done the thing properly. You trim the lamp wick, though dawn is not far away, the flame steadies. Its yellow light leans across the bench and shines on the first matrix. The engraved metal is cold enough to mist when you breathe near it. In the hollow of the imperial arms, tiny shadows hold. The double-headed eagle, the shield, the crown, and the lettering around the edge are reversed in the die. Everything that looks backward now will become right when pressed into wax. That is one of the quiet lessons of the room. A thing must be made in reverse, so the world can read it properly. You set the matrix onto its padded rest, and check the old screw press beside it. The press has a broad base, a vertical frame, and a threaded screw that lowers the die with steady force. Its handle is dark from hands. Not one pair of hands. Many hands through many years, turning the same arc, stopping at the same felt resistance. A hand press does not rush. It rewards patience. It gives back the pressure you give it, and it tells you when the wax is ready. The first bundle is from the railway desk. You untie the cotton tape, lay the papers square, and read the docket without following the private lines beneath. A seal pressman sees more than he needs and learns not to read more than he must. These papers certify a movement of freight wagons toward Galicia. Coal, flour, machine parts, and medical stores are listed in careful ink. The railway office has marked them for the morning courier, so they belong near the front. You check the seal instruction. The smaller ministry seal will do. That is good. It means the large imperial matrix can remain aside for the moment, and the first impressions can move quickly. You enter the first document number into the ledger. Then you take a small pellet of softened wax, cut from the warmed stick with a flat knife. The knife has a wooden handle and a blade dulled by usefulness. It is not a cooking knife, though it works almost like one. You roll the wax gently between finger and thumb, making a low mound where the paper tag crosses itself. The paper tag is not decoration. It is a narrow strip threaded through slits in the document, folded or tied so the seal locks pages together. If someone disturbs the pages, the wax will show it. A seal is authority, yes, but it is also a quiet guard. You place the tag under the press, align the wax mound beneath the matrix, and lower the screw. The handle turns with a soft wooden creak. The press descends. There is a moment of resistance, then a deeper yielding as the warm wax fills the engraving. You hold it for a few breaths. Then you raise the screw and look. The impression is clean. The letters are sharp enough. The edge is rounded, not smeared. You place the document on the cooling board, a flat sheet of metal kept away from the stove. There the wax will harden slowly and not lift against another sheet. One seal done, one line entered, one paper made able to travel. It sounds like little. It is little. But the empire is made of such little movements, repeated until provinces speak to ministries, and offices answer offices. The next railway paper follows. Then another. The work becomes a measured sequence of touch and sight. Read the docket, check the seal, warm the wax, lay the tag, lower the screw, lift, inspect, cool. Record. Your breathing begins to match it. The room does too. Even the stove seems to keep time. After 12 railway certificates, the first small setback appears. A docket marked urgent has been tied with the railway bundle, but its authority line belongs to military supply. The clerk who sorted it in the night has used the wrong colored tape. It is a simple mistake, a tired hand in another room, under another lamp. But if you seal it as a railway certificate, someone at the receiving desk may question it. If you stop too long, the morning railway pouch will lose its place. So you make the choice that a pressman makes often. You do not fix another officer's mistake silently. You set the paper aside, write a pencil mark beside its number, and place it in the uncertainty tray. Because a crooked routine is still crooked, even when it saves a few minutes. The remaining railway papers are cleaned. You finish them in order and move them to the left side of the bench, where finished documents lie face upward. Their seals catch the lamplight like small dull coins, not shiny. Wax should not shine too much. A high gloss can mean it cooled too quickly or was heated too far. The best seal has a calm surface, with the design standing clear and firm. You touch only the paper, never the fresh wax. A thumbprint in an official seal is a very human thing and not usually welcome. By now the windows are pale rather than black. Vienna is waking slowly beyond the glass. A cart passes in the street below, iron wheel rims clicking on uneven stone. Somewhere in the building, a door closes, then another. The first clerks are arriving with collars turned up against the damp. They will warm their fingers around coffee glasses, shake water from their coats, and pretend they are not still sleepy. You have been at work long enough that the room already smells settled. Warm wax, cold paper, stove iron, lamp oil. A faint trace of dust from the ledger pages. The next bundle is military supply permission. These documents carry a different rhythm. They often need ribbons rather than simple paper tags, because the receiving officers expect a visible strip under the seal. The ribbons are narrow, sometimes red and white, sometimes plain, depending on department use and form. You keep them rolled in the cabinet drawer, protected from soot and damp. Ribbon work is slower. The ends must be cut cleanly, pulled through the paper without fraying, crossed at the right angle, and held flat. Wax laid onto a twisted ribbon makes a poor bed. The matrix catches on the raised thread and leaves gaps in the arms. You prepare the first ribbon using the small bone folder to press the crossing flat. The bone folder is smooth, yellowed, and polished by years of use. It was once a plain tool, made for creasing paper and guiding folds. In this room, it is as useful as any official stamp. You lay the wax over the ribbon crossing and wait a little longer than before. Ribbon takes heat away from the wax. It is a small thing, but small things decide whether the seal holds. The screw press lowers again, the handle turns, your shoulder knows where to stop. The impression rises cleanly, though one edge is slightly high. You note it with your eyes, not with ink. It is acceptable. Not every seal is perfect, and not every imperfection matters. The art is knowing which small irregularities are harmless, and which can cause a paper to come back. The senior pressman taught you that years ago, when you were still allowed only to trim ribbon and count wafers. He had said, in his quiet way, that a seal must satisfy the law first, the eye second, and pride last. You remember that often, especially on mornings like this. Another messenger arrives before the hour has fully turned. He is young, with reddened ears and a wool scarf tucked badly under his collar. He carries 2 tied bundles under one arm and a folded slip in his gloved hand. The slip bears the mark of the provincial appointments desk. He places everything near the door, because messengers know not to crowd the seal bench. Then he waits. You look up, not annoyed, only measuring the interruption. He says the appointments are wanted for the 10 o'clock courier. He also says the secretary wrote that they should receive the older imperial office seal. That word, older, makes you pause. Not visibly much, only enough that your hand stops above the ribbon drawer. You take the slip and read it again. The appointment forms are dated this week, but the office named at the top was reorganized earlier in the month. A newer administrative stamp may be required, or the old imperial matrix may still be correct, if the appointment authority remained with the Crown Office. Both are possible. Both have happened. In a large monarchy, paperwork does not change all at once. It changes by decree, by habit, by printed form, by local understanding, and by the speed of a clerk replacing stationery. You do not decide from memory. Memory is useful, but it is not law. So the second decision of the morning comes quietly. You set the provincial bundles in the uncertainty tray beside the misfiled military paper. You write a neat pencil mark in the register margin. Then you tell the young messenger to find Herr Kohler, the junior clerk from the appointments desk, and ask for the current seal instruction in writing. The messenger nods, glad to have a clear errand. He leaves with quick steps that fade into the corridor. The uncertainty tray is now larger. That has consequences. The 10 o'clock courier will not receive those appointments unless confirmation returns soon. But a wrong seal could do worse than miss a bag. It could make an appointment doubtful at the provincial office, where a district clerk, far from Vienna, must decide whether to accept the authority on site. A clean delay is better than a dirty haste. You return to the military supply bundle. The work that can be done must continue, because waiting papers do not warm themselves into order. Wax pellets are lined along the edge of a small tin plate near the stove. Not too near. A pressman learns distances as much as procedures. The left side of the plate is for wax ready to use. The right side is for pieces still too stiff. Broken fragments from trimmed seals go in a small cup, to be remelted only for practice or non-formal closures. Official impressions deserve fresh material. It is not always written down, it is simply known. The assistant arrives just before 7:30. His name is Emile, and he is still young enough to look surprised by the cold every morning. He removes his cap, hangs it on the same peg, and washes his hands in the basin. The water is sharp with chill. He dries his fingers carefully because damp fingers pull at paper and stain ribbon. You do not greet him loudly. You point to the finished railway stack, then to the military pile, then to the uncertainty tray. He understands the map of the bench. He takes the railway stack to the outgoing shelf, where finished papers wait beneath a clean cloth. The cloth keeps dust away, but it also reminds everyone that the papers are no longer merely paper. They have passed through the room. They have received their mark. Emile returns to the bench and begins trimming ribbon ends from the military pile. He uses the small scissors with the narrow blades, the ones kept sharp for cloth and never for string. A dull blade chews ribbon. A chewed ribbon catches under wax, and a caught ribbon can make a seal look careless, even when the document itself is correct. The first clerks begin to pass the open door in twos and threes. Their boots sound damp on the stone corridor. Some look in as they pass, but they do not enter unless they have papers to leave. The seal room is near the offices, but not part of their ordinary conversation. It is a room of pause, a room where paper waits to become official. By 8 o'clock, the first full messenger round begins. Bundles come from the ministry corridor, the railway section, the military supply office, and the appointments desk. Each bundle has a tied docket slip, and each slip has a different kind of handwriting. Some clerks write like schoolmasters, square and slow. Some write in a running hand that leans forward, as if the ink itself is hurrying down the page. You learn the hands over time. You know who writes too little. You know who writes too much. You know which office forgets to mark ribbon color unless reminded twice. Emile receives the bundles at the side table and calls the department name softly. You answer without looking up because your eyes are on the wax mound beneath the die. Military supply, railway, appointments pending, court correspondence, provincial administration. He places each bundle where the bench can still be read at a glance. A seal room bench is like a small map of a large empire. Vienna is at the center, not because the wood knows it, but because the papers come here for permission to move outward. Galicia lies in one pile, Bohemia in another. Hungary arrives in a different form, often with its own administrative habits and its own careful wording. Dalmatia, Tyrol, Moravia, Carniola, Bukovina and Lower Austria appear as docket names, as destination lines, as railway routes, as offices that will open these papers days later. You do not see the mountains, the yards, the storehouses, or the town halls. You see the folded edges of paper. You see where a ribbon has been threaded. You see whether a seal will be trusted when it arrives. The morning becomes fuller, not loud, full. The stove ticks more often as the door is opened and closed. Cold air crosses the floor each time a messenger enters. The wax near the edge of the tin plate stiffens, while the wax closest to the stove softens too far. So Emile shifts the tin half a handspan to the left. He does it without being told. That is a good sign. A junior assistant learns the room first by instruction, then by correction, and later by noticing. Noticing is the true beginning of competence. You let him have the small ministry seal for the next batch. It is not the oldest matrix, and not the most formal, but it is used often enough to teach the hand. He checks the docket, moistens the paper wafer, and pauses before setting it under the press. The wafer is pale, thin, and slightly brittle. It is used on some internal papers where wax would be too heavy, or where folded bundles must stack flat. A wafer seal is made from starch, gum, and coloring, sometimes with a little sizing pressed between paper and matrix while damp. It is humbler than wax. It leaves less depth. But it also has its place. In older offices, wafers became common where speed and neatness mattered more than ceremony. They could be stored in small round boxes, counted, moistened, and pressed quickly. A wax seal speaks in relief. A wafer seal speaks in pressure and stain. Emil touches the wafer to the damp sponge, waits one breath, and sets it exactly over the join. He lowers the small press. Not enough. You hear it before you see it. The handle stops too early, and the old frame gives only a shallow sigh. He lifts the die, and the impression is faint along the lower lettering. He looks at you. You shake your head once. Not angrily, just once. The paper is internal, and the wafer can be removed before it sets completely. Emil peels it away with the tip of a knife and places the spoiled wafer in the reject dish. He enters nothing yet. No official seal has been completed. That is also part of the work, knowing when a failed beginning has not yet become an official act. You take a fresh wafer and set it down yourself. Then you guide his hand on the handle. The pressure is not force, exactly. It is follow-through. The screw must come down steadily until the paper, wafer, and die agree with one another. You let him feel that last small turn where the resistance changes. There, that is enough. When he raises the die, the letters are clear. The crest is shallow, but readable. You nod. He exhales through his nose, relieved. The work continues. A clock in the corridor strikes the half hour. The sound reaches the seal room softened by walls and door frames. It is easy to lose hours here because the motions repeat in such even measure, but the ledger does not lose them. At each change of batch you write the time. 8:30, 8:40, 9 o'clock. You write department names in their own column because if a dispute comes later, no one should have to guess which office sent what. The register is both memory and shield. It protects the clerk who asked properly. It protects the pressman who sealed properly. It protects the receiving office, which may need to know why a paper bears one impression and not another. Official wax is a small thing, but it lives inside a system of proof. By 9, the uncertainty tray has gained 2 more bundles. One contains court correspondence with a printed form older than the current instruction. Another contains a military exemption paper that asks for black wax. Black wax is not kept on the open bench. It is reserved for morning notices, certain legal closures, and a few formal uses that must be checked. The docket says black. The authority line says ordinary red. The difference is not decorative. Color can carry meaning. Red was common in many imperial offices, strong and visible, associated with authority and continuity. Black could signal mourning, solemn closure, or a special category of correspondence. Green, yellow, and other colors had local or departmental uses in different times and places. A pressman does not treat color as ornament. Color is part of the language. You place the exemption paper aside. Emil sees where it goes and writes a small pencil query on a loose slip. Black wax requested. Authority line ordinary. Confirm. He sand sprinkles the slip so the pencil does not smear, although pencil scarcely needs it. That is habit learned from ink work. Good offices are made of useful habits, and also of a few habits that remain because they cause no harm. The messenger from appointments returns before the 10 o'clock courier, but not soon enough to make the work easy. He brings hair collar's written instruction folded twice with an ink blot near the seal line. The newer administrative seal is to be used for most of the provincial appointments. But 3 documents in the bundle remain under the old imperial authority, because their nominations were signed before the change in office form. So 1 bundle becomes 2, then 3. You loosen the tape and separate the documents by date and authority line. Emil reads the names softly, only enough to match them to the list. A district school inspector, a tax assessor, a railway stores supervisor, a clerk for a provincial archive, a deputy official for a land registry office. These are not grand appointments in the courtly sense. They are positions that keep roofs repaired, accounts checked, records stored, and letters answered. Yet each one needs the right seal. A person waiting far from Vienna may not know the room exists. He may only know that his appointment paper is late. But here, on this bench, the reason is visible. A line changed, a form lagged behind. A seal must match not only the document, but the authority that gives the document life. You prepare the newer administrative matrix first. It is smaller than the great imperial seal, and its engraving is less deep. The arms are still present, but arranged for the office rather than the sovereign's direct command. Its metal has a cleaner brightness, because it has not been handled for decades. Newer dies feel different. They do not yet have the fine polish that comes from years of cloth and fingers. The edges can be sharper than expected. You wipe it with a soft rag and breathe on the surface, watching the faint mist fade. A speck of dust sits near the lettering. You remove it with the corner of the cloth, never with a fingernail. A fingernail can leave oil. Oil catches wax. Wax holds dust. The chain of small causes is always longer than outsiders think. The first appointment paper has ribbon already threaded. The ribbon is pale and narrow, perhaps cut in haste from an older roll. You flatten it with the bone folder, warm the wax a little longer, and press. The impression is sound. Emil records it, then the second, then the third. The motion settles back into rhythm, but the tray beside the inkstand remains in sight. Uncertain papers weigh differently from ordinary papers. They seem to keep their questions even while lying still. The 10 o'clock courier arrives with a leather pouch and a list. He is older than the morning messengers and does not ask for explanations unless he needs them. His mustache is damp from the fog outside. He places the pouch on the side chair, never on the seal bench. He has learned this room's customs. You hand him the railway certificates, the finished ministry papers, and the appointment papers that have cleared. He counts the bundles by docket, not by page. Emil reads the dispatch notes aloud. Railway certificates for Galicia, military supply permissions for the quartermaster section, provincial appointments, partial, awaiting confirmation on remaining documents. The courier writes, partial beside his list. His pencil is short, with a knife cut point. He does not complain. Couriers know that paper delayed here may save delay elsewhere. He ties the finished packets into the pouch, pulls the strap through the brass buckle, and lifts it with practiced economy. The bag leaves the room. The papers inside begin their second life. From now on, they belong to corridors, street carts, railway platforms, station clerks, provincial desks, and hands you will never see. For a moment, the bench looks clearer. Then another messenger arrives. That is how the day keeps itself from ending too soon. By mid-morning, the room has warmed, but only near the stove. The window glass remains cold. A faint cloud forms if you breathe close to it. Beyond the courtyard, roofs show dull brown and grey beneath the low sky. Vienna in late autumn has a way of pressing sound downward. Hooves seem softer. Bells seem nearer. Even voices in the street arrive as if wrapped in wool. Inside, the seal room smells more strongly of resin now. The wax sticks have warmed through, and their scent rises whenever the knife cuts a fresh piece. Some sealing wax contains shellac, brought through trade routes from far away, refined and mixed with resins and pigments. Some recipes are harder, made for seals that must survive travel. Others are softer, used for papers that remain in ledgers or cabinets. The wax in this office is chosen for official durability. It must hold. It must not crumble when a provincial clerk opens a packet in a cold room. It must not soften too much if carried near a stove on a railway journey. Like many practical materials, it carries the quiet intelligence of many failures. Somewhere, at some time, wax cracked too easily, so someone changed the mixture. Somewhere, an impression blurred, so someone altered the heat. A material becomes reliable because generations of workers have noticed its disobedience. You draw another military permission forward. This one has a parchment tag rather than paper ribbon. Parchment is tougher, made from prepared animal skin, scraped and dried under tension. It has a faint curl and a different sound under the fingers. Paper folds. Parchment springs. When used as a tag, it must be pulled through carefully because its edge can widen the slit in the document. You soften it slightly between finger and thumb. Then you press it flat with the bone folder. The wax mound must be a little wider for parchment. It does not drink heat like ribbon, but it resists the wax differently. The press comes down, the die fills. The eagle appears cleanly when lifted. A good impression on parchment has a certain satisfying firmness. It sits like a small red island on a pale strip. Emil leans closer, but not too close. He has learned not to breathe dust onto warm wax. You let him inspect it. He points to the edge. There is a tiny feathering where the wax spread along the grain of the tag. Acceptable, you say. The word is quiet, but useful. He repeats it, not aloud, but in the way he sets his shoulders. Acceptable, not perfect, not rejected. The categories matter. Too strict a pressman stops the office. Too loose a pressman weakens it. The craft lies between fussing and negligence. Near 10:30, Herr Koller himself appears at the door. He is a narrow man with ink at the side of one finger and a collar that never sits quite evenly. He apologizes for the appointment forms. You tell him there is no need for apology, only instruction. That is true. Apologies do not tell you which seal to use. Instructions do. He brings a revised list and stays while you compare it with the waiting documents. There are 5 names requiring the newer administrative seal, 2 requiring the older authority. 1 must be returned for rewording. The rewording concerns the phrase by imperial appointment. The authority now belongs through the ministry, not directly through the old form. It is only a few words, but a few words can change the legal path of a paper. You place the rewording paper in a separate folder marked returned, not rejected, returned. There is a gentler feeling in that word and a more accurate one. The paper may come back corrected. It has not failed forever. Kohler signs the register margin beside the instruction. His signature is thin and upright. You blot it with care. Ink in a seal register should not smear, because smeared ink makes future confidence harder. The appointments can now proceed. Wax, ribbon, press, inspection, ledger. The repetition returns, but changed by the morning's corrections. You are no longer simply sealing a pile, you are shepherding separate streams back into their proper channels. Emil prepares tags for the confirmed papers. He counts under his breath. Not numbers loudly, just small movements of the mouth. Counting is part of nearly every quiet job. The night watchman counts doors. The typesetter counts spaces. The lockkeeper counts gates. The seal pressman counts impressions, ribbons, spoiled wafers, outgoing bundles, and keys. Counting keeps the hand honest when the mind has grown used to the work. At 11, the military office sends a senior clerk to answer the black wax query. He arrives with the slow confidence of a man who has walked the same corridor for many years. He reads the docket, frowns at the black wax note, and shakes his head. Ordinary read, he says, the black notation belongs to a different form. A clerk copied it by habit. There it is again, habit. Sometimes habit saves the office, sometimes it sends the wrong color to the seal room. You alter the pencil note, then enter the correction beside the document number. Red wax confirmed by military office. The senior clerk initials it. The paper returns to the active pile. Nothing dramatic has happened. No one has raised a voice, but the document has been prevented from carrying a meaning it was never meant to carry. That is the kind of victory a seal room knows. Small, invisible, durable. Just before noon, the old press begins to complain. It is not a loud sound. It is a faint unevenness in the descent, a slight rasp in the screw thread near the lower turn. You feel it in the handle before Emil hears it. The pressure catches, releases, and catches again. You stop at once. The wax beneath the die waits. It can wait a few breaths. Better to lose one impression than scar the matrix. You raise the screw slowly. The wax has taken only a shallow outline. This one cannot pass. You lift the warm wax cleanly with the knife before it hardens and place the tag aside for rethreading. Then you turn the press empty, listening. Down, up, down again. The rasp returns at the same point. The old screw has worn unevenly, or a fleck of hardened wax has found the thread, or the lower bed has shifted by a hair. A hair is enough. The press is heavy, built for steadiness rather than convenience. Its frame may be iron, its guide pieces brass, its handle dark hardwood rubbed smooth by years of use. You ask Emile to close the stove door and bring the small maintenance tray from the lower cabinet. The tray holds a soft brush, two folded cloths, a little bottle of light oil, and a narrow wooden pick. No metal point is used near the thread unless there is no other choice. Metal against metal makes marks that stay. You loosen the retaining screw, lift the upper guide enough to see beneath it, and find a red crumb lodged where the thread narrows. It is hardly larger than a grain of barley. Still, it has made itself known. Emile leans over your shoulder, quiet enough that you can hear his breathing slow. You touch the crumb with the wooden pick, coaxing it free a little at a time. It clings at first, softened by the warmth of the room and pressed flat by use. Then it breaks loose and falls onto the cloth. A tiny thing has stopped a larger thing. That is not unusual in this work. You wipe the thread with the dry cloth first, turning the screw slowly so the cloth follows every groove. Then you use the smallest trace of oil, not enough to drip, only enough to darken the cloth. Too much oil is its own trouble. Oil finds paper, and paper remembers oil for years. You work the screw down and up again, feeling for the catch. The first pass is better. The second pass is smooth. The third pass tells you the crumb was not the whole story. Near the lower turn, the pressure still leans to one side. The press bed has worn unevenly after long service. Not badly. Not today's disaster, but enough. You remove the scrap board from beneath the base and place a strip of thin card along the right rear edge. The card is old, cut from a rejected ledger cover, stiff and plain. It lifts the bed by less than the thickness of a fingernail. A fingernail's thickness can decide whether a crown prints sharply or fades. You take a piece of scrap paper, a ribbon offcut, and a practice pellet of recovered wax. The practice wax is duller than fresh wax because it has been handled, lifted, and warmed before. It is good enough for testing. You lay the scrap under the die and lower the press with your fingertips resting lightly on the handle. The impression appears. The outer letters are clear. The eagle's breast is still a little faint. You add a second, thinner strip of card, placed not under the whole bed, but toward the front. Again the scrap. Again the wax. Again the slow turn. This time, the breast shield takes the wax more fully. The small lines within it are not perfect, but they stand. You show Emile the difference between the two tests. He looks from one to the other, and his face has the attentive stillness of someone being allowed to see behind the routine. The first impression would pass on a busy internal closure. The second would pass on an appointment paper. Neither would satisfy you for the largest imperial seal if the paper were formal enough. That is the hierarchy of judgment. Not every document asks the same of the press. Not every seal bears the same scrutiny. But the equipment book asks for honesty. You pull it from the shelf beneath the ledger. It is narrower than the register, bound in dark cloth rubbed pale at the corners. Inside are dates, repairs, complaints, cleanings, replaced handles, sharpened knives, reordered ribbons, and notes about wax that arrived brittle in winter. Most entries are brief. A tool's life is written in plain words. You dip the pen and write the day's date, the 21st of November, 1916. Then you write that the old screw press shows slight uneven descent at the lower turn. You add that the thread has been cleaned, the bed shimmed temporarily, and further inspection is requested. The word temporarily matters. It prevents a small adjustment from becoming an invisible permanent repair. Emile sands the entry and waits until the grains drink the top shine from the ink. Then he tilts the book and pours the sand back into its little tin. The bench can work again, but it is no longer exactly the same bench as it was before noon. It now carries a note. A note is quiet, but it changes responsibility. If the press fails tomorrow, someone can see that it began to fail today. You return to the interrupted document. Its tag is damaged where the shallow wax was lifted, so you do not reuse it. You cut a fresh parchment strip and thread it carefully through the slits. This takes longer than anyone waiting in a corridor would imagine. The old strip must be removed without tearing the paper. The new strip must follow the same path. The folded edge must sit flat. You smooth the lower margin with the bone folder, then place the wax mound over the crossing. The press descends with its newly restored smoothness. You hold it for 3 breaths. When you lift, the impression is clean enough to leave the room. You do not call it perfect. You call it sound. There is comfort in a sound thing. A chair that does not rock. A latch that catches. A seal that proves what it is meant to prove. No one outside this room may notice the repair. No one receiving the document may see the extra minutes spent before the impression was made. That is often the best outcome of careful work. Its success is silence. The noon hour does not stop the room. It only changes the bodies inside it. Clerks in the corridor leave for bread, soup, or coffee, taking their papers with them or trusting them to trays. Messengers grow slower for a while because kitchens and canteens pull them away. You and Emile take turns eating, never both at once. A seal room should not sit unattended with matrices unlocked. Emile eats first at the side table, keeping his hands away from the bench. He has brought dark bread wrapped in paper, a little cheese, and an apple bruised on one side. The apple smells sharp and sweet when he cuts it with his pocket knife. You tell him to save the peelings for the stove ash bucket, not the waste paper basket. He nods, chewing carefully. Such corrections are small. They are also how a room teaches a person to belong to it. When your turn comes, you eat standing near the window. The glass gives back the blurred shape of your face. Beyond it, the courtyard stones hold a grey shine from morning damp. Your bread is dry at the edge. The coffee in the enamel cup has cooled. Still, it steadies the body. You drink slowly, watching the wax plate and listening to the corridor breathe. A door opens. A chair scrapes somewhere far away. A clerk laughs once, then remembers where he is. The seal room has its own manners. Even laughter seems to lower itself at the threshold. Afternoon, the light changes. It becomes flatter, more practical. The lamp is no longer needed, but you leave it ready because late autumn afternoons are brief. The bench shows more clearly now. Dried red wax lies in the grain of the wood, in places too old and thin to remove without cutting the surface. The brass guide rails have bright lines where hands and cloths have touched them for years. The base of the press bears a crescent mark from an earlier handle, replaced before Emile came to the office. Tools remember former hands in ways registers do not. The official records name the clerk, the department, the seal, the hour. They do not name the small crease in the pressman's thumb, the angle of his wrist, or the habit of turning the wax knife before setting it down. Yet those things shape the work. They make one seal clean and another uncertain. They turn a printed rule into an act done in time. You set out the larger matrix for a group of court papers. The old imperial arms are deeper than the ministry seals. They ask for a fuller bed of wax, too thin and the center does not fill, too thick and the wax spreads beyond the intended rim. You warm a fresh stick and cut from its end, turning it after each cut so it keeps its shape. The stick is stamped faintly by its maker, though the lettering is blurred from handling. Suppliers of sealing wax were often modest industrial chemists, stationers or specialist makers who understood resins, fillers, pigments, and the needs of offices. They made wax for private letters, commercial packets, legal closures, and state papers. Some wax was sold by color and hardness, some by intended use. Here the choice has already been made before the stick reaches your drawer, but you still judge each piece as if it were new. A batch can vary. A cold day can make a familiar wax behave differently. The first court paper is heavy, folded from good rag paper. Rag paper has a quiet strength, made from linen or cotton fibers beaten into pulp. It takes ink well and ages better than cheap wood pulp paper. Under the fingers, it feels less brittle. The fold resists, then yields. You thread the ribbon through, align it, and lay the wax. The press comes down. The repaired bed helps. The outer lettering forms sharply. but the deepest part of the eagle's chest remains a shade light. You narrow your eyes, not displeased, only measuring. You try again on scrap, this time with a slightly thinner wax mound spread wider before pressing. Better. The deep lines take more evenly because the wax has less excess to escape at the edge. This is a small adjustment, learned in the middle of ordinary work. You tell Emile to note that the larger matrix should use a thinner, wider wax bed until repair. He writes it on a loose card and places it beside the press. Not in the ledger. The ledger records official acts. The card guides hands. Both kinds of writing matter. You continue the court papers with the altered method. The wax is pressed flatter before the die descends. The handle is turned a little farther than usual, but with no sudden force. The hold is longer. Raise, inspect, cool. Raise, inspect, cool. The repetition returns, now carrying the memory of the old press's wear. You become aware of your shoulder. Not pain, a dull knowledge of use. Pressmen who worked long days developed a quiet map of their own bodies. The thumb that steadied ribbon, the wrist that lifted matrices, the shoulder that turned the handle, the back that bent over ledgers. No one called it skill when it looked easy, but it was skill. It was the body learning a narrow world completely. Emile brings the cooling board closer to the window, where the air is colder. You stop him before he sets it too near the glass. Cold is useful, but too much cold can make warm wax shrink unevenly. The surface may look fine while a little crack forms underneath. A seal should cool, not be shocked, so the board stays midway between stove and window. A middle place again. The room is full of middle places. Between heat and chill, between speed and caution, between law and material, between the hand that signs and the hand that proves the signature's passage into office. At 1 o'clock, another batch arrives from the railway section. The clerk who brings it is flushed from walking quickly. He says the papers must leave before the afternoon pouch. You take the docket and read it without comment. The papers are corrected replacements for a set sealed earlier in the week. A routing error had sent freight orders toward the wrong transfer yard. The new papers need the same ministry seal, and the docket is clear. That is a relief, of a practical kind. Not everything difficult is complicated. Some work is simply plentiful. Emile sets up wafers for the internal copies while you prepare wax for the outgoing certificates. The wafer box clicks softly when opened. Inside, the thin circles lie stacked like pale coins. They smell faintly of gum and dry paper. He moistens them one at a time, no more than he can press before they begin to curl. A wet wafer waits badly. It wrinkles, lifts, and stains. A dry wafer refuses the paper. The sponge must be damp, not dripping. Again, the lesson is measure. You seal the railway certificates with steady speed. These do not require ribbons. Their authority rests in the printed form, the signature, and the pressed wafer or wax closure at the fold. Each receives its mark. Each is cooled, stacked, and counted. The afternoon pouch will be tighter now, but not lost. The young railway clerk stays near the door, shifting his weight once. He wants to ask whether they will be done. He does not ask. He watches the bench and learns, perhaps for the first time, that urgency cannot turn a screw faster than wax can accept. When the final railway paper cools, you hand him the stack. He bows his head, not ceremonially, just enough. The papers leave with him. The room exhales. Then the old building seems to take a breath of its own. Somewhere above, footsteps move quickly along a corridor not usually busy at this hour. A door opens hard, then is closed with restraint. Voices pass, lower than ordinary, carrying no words clearly. You look up. Emile looks up too. Nothing enters the seal room yet. So the seal room continues. That is what officers do when they do not know enough to stop. They continue until an instruction reaches them. You finish the court batch. You enter the last document number. You blot the ink. You wipe the matrix with cloth, clearing the fine red residue from the lettering. Wax can build in the hollows of a die until it softens detail. The residue is not always visible. It appears as dullness in the next impression, so after a formal batch you clean. Not later, now. The cloth catches red dust. You fold it inward so the dirty part does not touch the bench. Emil brings the equipment book again, asking with his eyes whether to add the improved method. You shake your head. The defect is already recorded. Temporary handling notes can remain on the card. An equipment book should not become a weather diary of every movement. It should remember what the office must answer for. At 1:30, Herr Koller passes the door again, but this time he does not enter. His face is pale, and he walks as if carrying a message inside his coat. Behind him, two clerks from the higher office move toward the main secretary's room. Their boots are careful on the stone. You cannot name the change yet. It is like the hush before a funeral carriage turns into a street, when people understand from the horses and wheels before anyone speaks. But still, no instruction has reached your bench. You draw forward a small bundle from provincial administration. Its docket is clean. The seal required is the newer administrative matrix used earlier. You set wax to warm. You inspect the ribbon. You prepare the first paper. The hand continues because the hand has work. There are times in a large institution when knowledge moves unevenly. One room has heard, another room has not. One desk stops, another signs. One corridor whispers, another still copies figures into a ledger. The seal room waits for written authority because a rumor cannot withdraw a seal. A rumor cannot change a register. A rumor cannot tell a pressman which matrix may be used after the hour. At 2:00, the clock strikes slowly. Each note comes down the corridor as if wrapped in felt. Before the last vibration has faded, the senior secretary's assistant appears at the doorway. He is not a messenger. He wears a dark coat, and his gloves are folded in one hand. Behind him stands a witness clerk from the registry. The assistant says your name quietly. Then he places a sealed instruction on the side table. It bears a high office wafer and a black-edged docket slip. You do not touch it with waxed fingers. You wipe your hands first. You move the active paper aside, uncovered but unpressed. You take up the instruction and break the wafer carefully. Inside, the wording is brief, formal, and heavy with consequence. Upon notification of the death of His Imperial and Royal Apostolic Majesty, Emperor Franz Joseph, certain seals, ciphers, and forms bearing direct reference to his person are to be withdrawn from ordinary use. The time is entered. The instruction lists categories, not every document by name. The old imperial matrix on your bench is among those affected. The room is very still, not empty, still. The stove ticks. A coal shifts softly. Emil's hand rests beside the ribbon roll, not touching it. You read the instruction a second time, because the first reading belongs to shock, and the second to work. Franz Joseph had reigned for so long that many men in the building had never served under any other emperor. His face was on offices, coins, portraits, prayers, stamps, letterheads, and assumptions. Yet here, in the seal room, the change arrives as a list of seals to stop using. That is how vast changes enter practical rooms. Not as thunder, as categories, as withdrawals, as corrections to forms, as cabinets that must be locked before the next impression. You place the instruction flat on the bench, away from the wax. Then you ask the assistant to remain as witness. Your voice is low and ordinary, because the work asks for ordinary steadiness. You tell Emil to cover the active stacks and move all unsealed documents to the right side. Nothing else is pressed until each paper is checked. He moves carefully. The ribbon roll is closed. The wax knife is wiped. The warm wax pellets on the tin plate are no longer assigned to any paper. They sit there, soft and unused, as if waiting for a command that will not come. You lift the old imperial matrix from its padded rest. It is heavier than it seemed in the morning. Metal does not gain weight in an afternoon. Meaning does. You wipe it clean slowly, making sure no red wax remains in the letters. The double-headed eagle looks backward in the die, as it always has, but now its backwardness feels different. This metal can still make a readable mark. It has not broken, it has not dulled beyond use, yet authority has moved away from it. That is a strange thing about official tools. Their usefulness can end while their material strength remains. You carry the matrix to the cabinet. The assistant and the registry clerk step closer. You open the inner drawer, the one with separate compartments lined in worn green cloth. Each matrix has its place, labeled by office and use. There is a small space for withdrawn or suspended seals, used rarely and with care. You place the imperial matrix there. You set the written instruction beside the compartment for the moment, so the witnesses can see the connection. Then you close the drawer. The lock turns with a clear sound. It is not loud, but everyone in the room hears it. You enter the withdrawal in the custody book. Date, hour, instruction received from higher office. Seal matrix withdrawn from ordinary use. Witnesses present. You write the names slowly. The secretary's assistant signs. The registry clerk adds his name below, pressing the pen a little harder than usual. The ink looks dark and wet against the pale page. You sand it carefully, because even this line must dry without disturbance. The assistant watches the sand fall, and for a moment, no one speaks. Then he folds the instruction again, not as a closed matter, but as a document now belonging to the room. You place it in the custody book, under the page where the withdrawal is written. It will stay there until copied into the central register. Emile stands beside the covered piles, waiting for your next word. His face is quiet, but his hands have not yet found their usual confidence. That is understandable. A room can change shape without moving a single piece of furniture. The same bench is here, the same stove, the same press with its worn screw and shimmed bed, but the old matrix is no longer available to the hand. You look across the waiting papers, and the practical work returns first. The instruction has stopped one kind of seal, but it has not answered every pending question. Some documents may still pass under ministry seals. Some may need the newer administrative seal. Some refer directly to the late emperor's person, and those must wait. Some have already been signed under wording that no longer matches the mark they were meant to receive. You ask the secretary's assistant whether a provisional matrix has been prepared. He says one is being brought from the higher office under separate custody. Not yet. Soon. Soon is a difficult word in a seal room. Wax does not respond to soon. Couriers do not depart on soon. Registers do not accept soon as an entry. So you begin with what can be known. You lift the top document from the first covered stack and read only the official line. Not the private sentences, not the clerkly explanations, only the part that tells the room what authority it must prove. The paper refers to His Imperial and Royal Apostolic Majesty by title, and to an appointment made before the notice. It may need rewording. You place it in a tray marked Hold for review. The next paper is a ministry certificate, signed by the department and not by direct sovereign formula. It can likely proceed under the ministry seal, once the assistant confirms. You place it in a second tray. The third is court correspondence with a pre-printed heading that bears the old cipher. It cannot be sealed as it stands. It goes to the hold tray. Emile begins to understand the new map. He uncovers one stack at a time, and you read the authority lines aloud in a low voice. Ministry, hold, review, reword, proceed. Old authority, new administrative seal, await provisional. The words become a sorting rhythm, different from the morning's wax and pressure, but just as exact. The assistant remains near the side table, answering when the instruction allows him to answer. When it does not, he says nothing. That silence is useful too. It prevents guesses from becoming office practice. A younger clerk might be tempted to make the day move by confidence alone, but confidence is not a seal. It leaves no lawful impression. You take a pencil and mark the docket slips, not the documents themselves. Pencil is used because the marks may change after review. Ink is for decisions that must stand. The distinction is small, but the room depends on it. A pencil mark says, pause here. An ink line says, this happened. By 2:30, The bench is no longer a single backlog. It has become several smaller burdens. The papers that may proceed are fewer than anyone hoped. The papers held for rewording make a thick bundle, tied with white tape and labeled for return. The papers awaiting the provisional seal sit alone near the center of the bench. They look almost ready. That is what makes them troublesome. A paper almost ready can waste more time than one plainly wrong. It tempts the hand. You keep those papers away from the press. The press cannot decide for them. The secretary's assistant takes the return bundle himself. He will not send it by ordinary messenger. The change is too fresh, and every office will want proof of why its papers have come back. He places the bundle under his arm, then pauses at the threshold. He looks toward the cabinet where the old matrix now rests in darkness. He does not bow. That would be too much for an office room. But he lowers his eyes for a breath. Then he leaves. The registry clerk stays a little longer to witness the cabinet being checked. You turn the key again, pull the drawer lightly to prove it is locked, and enter the check in the custody book. Custody is not only possession. It is the ability to show, later, that possession was not broken. A seal matrix is only a piece of engraved metal until it is misused. Then it can become a false door into authority. So cabinets are locked, keys are counted, witnesses sign. Habits become safeguards. The registry clerk nods once and goes back to his office. Now only you and Emile remain. The room feels larger with fewer people in it. The stove has burned low, and the wax on the tin plate has begun to stiffen at the edges. You take the unused pellets and separate them from the fresh sticks. They were prepared for work that did not happen. They will not be used for the first impressions of a new authority. That would feel careless, even if the material were technically sound. You put them in the practice cup. Emile watches this and asks, softly, whether the wax itself is now unsuitable. You tell him no, not in a ceremonial sense. It is only wax. But the first uses of a new matrix should be done with fresh material, clean hands, and no confusion on the bench. He nods. He understands enough. The day has become a lesson no manual could arrange. You open the cabinet drawer for active seals, not the withdrawn compartment. There, the ministry and administrative matrices remain in their places. They may still be used where the authority line allows. Their metal has not changed because the sovereign has died. The empire's offices do not halt all at once. Some powers flow through departments, some through delegated forms, some through printed authorizations that remain valid until amended. That is why the seal room must not mourn by stopping everything. It must mourn, if it mourns at all, by making distinctions. You bring out the newer administrative seal again. Its surface catches the afternoon light. The engraving is familiar from the morning, but now it seems less secondary. Tools rise and fall in use according to need. A seal that was minor at dawn may carry the afternoon. You wipe it with the clean cloth and place it in the smaller press. The old screw press is still serviceable, but its uneven bed makes you cautious. For ordinary ministry work, the smaller press will do. For deeper impressions, you may need the larger frame. You and Emile test both on scrap. The first test uses a fresh red wax pellet, warmed slowly at the stove. The administrative matrix prints clearly, with a firm ring and a shallow central crest. The second test uses a wafer, moistened and pressed under the small hand frame. The wafer takes the lettering well enough. Internal papers can proceed. You enter the test in no official ledger, because no document has been sealed. But you keep the scraps beside the bench for comparison. They are little witnesses to method. The afternoon continues in this narrower way. Preceding papers are handled one by one. Each is checked against the withdrawal instruction before wax is touched. The pace is slower than the morning. No one likes slow work when trays are high, but slow work has become the shortest safe path. A military supply permission comes forward. Its authority line is through the ministry. Its wording does not name the late emperor directly, except in the printed style of the office at the top. You hesitate. The printed style is old, but the instruction concerns direct reference in certain forms. You send Emile to the military office for confirmation. He goes quickly, but not running. Running in corridors makes people afraid, and there is enough unease already. While he is gone, you seal 2 internal railway copies with wafers. These are dull tasks, useful tasks. They remind the room that not every paper is caught in history's larger hinge. A wafer is touched to the sponge, the press descends, the paper is stacked. The register receives its line. Small order continues. Emile returns with a written confirmation from the military office. Proceed under ministry seal, pending revised printed stock. That phrase is useful. It tells you the old printed headings will be tolerated until new forms arrive. Forms do not remake themselves in an afternoon. Printers must receive text. Compositors must set type. Proofs must be read. Paper must be cut. Desks must exchange old stacks for new. Until then, offices live in the practical borderland between instruction and supply. You attach the confirmation slip to the docket, then you seal the military permission in red wax under the ministry matrix. The impression is plain, clean, and legally quiet. It is not the mark the clerk expected that morning, but it is the mark the afternoon permits. Near 3 o'clock, the provisional matrix arrives. It does not arrive alone. A senior custodian from the higher office carries it in a small wooden box wrapped in grey cloth. Beside him walks another witness clerk, older, with spectacles low on his nose. The box has 2 paper seals on its cord, and both must be inspected before opening. You clear the center of the bench. Emile removes the wax plate, the ribbon rolls, and the loose cards. The custodian places the box down gently. Wood touches wood with a small sound. He reads the delivery note aloud. A provisional seal matrix, prepared for authorized use pending full issue of new seals and forms. Its use is limited to categories specified by written instruction. It is to be entered in the custody book before first impression. He breaks the paper seals on the box. Inside, wrapped in soft cloth, lies a metal die that has not yet learned the room. It is clean, almost too clean. Its edges are sharp, its face is lightly oiled from storage or finishing. The engraving shows the required arms and wording for the new authority, but the lettering is less worn than the old matrices. Fresh engraving holds light differently. It has little bright ledges where the tool has cut. It looks awake. You do not pick it up at once. First, you compare the delivery note with the instruction. Seal name, office, authorized categories, date of delivery, custodian, witness. Then you open the custody book to a new line. The pen makes a small scratch as it starts. Provisional matrix received at 3:10 in the afternoon, delivered by higher office custody, witnessed by registry clerk, entered for restricted use. You write each phrase in calm ink. The custodian signs. The witness signs. Emile watches the signatures as though they are part of the matrix itself. In a way, they are. A seal without a record is a tool. A seal with a record is a responsibility. Only after the ink is sanded do you lift the new matrix from the cloth. It is colder than expected. Metal holds the chill of storage rooms. Its weight is a little less than the old imperial die, but its balance is different. The old one sat heavily in the palm. This one tilts toward the engraved face, as if asking to be set down. You turn it, not to admire it, but to learn it. The rim is fine. The center is deeper than the lettering. The crown area has small raised divisions that may trap air in wax. The shield lines are crisp, too crisp, perhaps, for a hurried impression. Sharp engraving can cut cleanly, but it can also hold wax if the release is not careful. You wipe the face with a soft cloth until the last trace of storage oil is gone. Oil and wax are uneasy companions. A little oil can help release a dye in some uses, but official impressions should not depend on it. The wax must take the engraving because pressure and heat are right, not because the surface has been made slippery. You set the provisional matrix beside the press and prepare a test. Fresh wax only. A ribbon offcut. Scrap paper from the reject pile. The wax needs a slightly warmer bed than the ministry seal. You cut a pellet and hold it near the stove until it bends under the knife. Then you shape it into a low mound, not too high, because the center of the die is deep. The press bed has been shimmed for the old matrix, so you remove one card strip and begin again. A new die deserves a new setting. You lower the screw slowly. The handle resists differently. You can feel the engraving enter the wax. There is a first softness, then a steadier hold, then a faint final settling as the wax fills the deeper lines. You count 3 breaths, then 4. Then you raise the die. The impression is almost good. Almost. The outer letters are clear, but 2 tiny hollows near the crown show pale air pockets. The wax did not reach them. The custodian leans closer. The witness adjusts his spectacles. Emile stops breathing for a moment, then remembers. You do not show disappointment. A first impression is a question asked of a tool. The tool has answered. Warm longer. Press slower. Perhaps spread wider before lowering. You cut another fresh pellet. This time, you warm the wax until it shines just at the surface, but does not sag. You press it flatter with the knife blade, making a broader bed. The die comes down more slowly. The handle moves in a long, even turn. You feel the last resistance and hold it. 5 breaths. The stove ticks once during the hold, then you lift. Better? The crown fills. The shield is clear. One small bubble remains near the lower edge, outside the lettering, acceptable for some work, but not for first official use. You set that test aside. A third test is made with wax a little softer and the ribbon warmed for a moment between fingers. Ribbon can chill the wax beneath it. Today, the room is not warm enough to ignore that. You cross the ribbon, flatten it, and lay the wax low and broad. The screw descends. Slow, even. No haste at the end. The die stays down long enough for the wax to settle into every cut. When it rises, the impression stands complete. The rim is firm. The crown is filled. The shield is sharp. The lettering is clear enough to satisfy a receiving office under poor light. You place the 3 tests in order on the bench. First failure, better attempt. Sound method. Emile looks at them, and you can see the lesson arrange itself in him. The new seal is not simply the old seal with new words. It has its own appetite. It asks for warmer wax, a broader bed, slower pressure, and a longer hold. Every matrix has a temperament, though no official instruction would use that word. The custodian accepts the 3rd test and initials the custody note. Use may begin. Those 3 words carry the afternoon forward. The first real document chosen for the provisional matrix is not the most urgent. You choose one that is clear, simple, and fully confirmed. A modest ministry authorization, corrected after the withdrawal notice, with the proper wording and ribbon already rethreaded. The first official impression should not be made on a doubtful paper. Doubt belongs in trays, not under fresh authority. You read the docket. Emile reads the document number. The witness clerk reads the category from the instruction. All 3 agree. You enter the document in the register before sealing, leaving the final initial blank until the impression is accepted. Then you prepare the ribbon. Its fibers are slightly crushed from earlier handling, so you cut a new length. The old length goes into the scrap box. No one objects. The moment asks for clean material. You thread the ribbon through the lower slits, draw the ends even, cross them without twist, and flatten them with the bone folder. The paper gives a soft crackle under the tool. Fresh wax is cut. Fresh wax is warmed. The red deepens as it softens. You place it over the ribbon crossing, broad and low. As the test has taught you, the provisional matrix is set in the press. You lower the screw. The room watches without appearing to watch. The handle turns through its arc. There is that new resistance, not yet familiar, but already less strange. You hold 1 breath, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you lift. The seal is clean. Not beautiful in a courtly sense, not ceremonial. Clean, readable, valid. The first paper of the new reign leaves the press with a red impression still warm at its center. You do not say anything. You place it on the cooling board. Emil fills in the register line. The custodian looks at the impression, then at the entry, and gives the slightest nod. The witness notes the time, 3:40 in the afternoon. A day has a spine of such hours. Before this hour, one mark. After this hour, another. The cooling wax grows dull as it hardens. Its color settles. The new impression becomes less like an event and more like an office fact. That is how quickly history becomes paperwork. The custodian remains for the first several impressions. Each document is checked against the written categories. Each ribbon is inspected. Each wax bed is warmed a little longer than habit would prefer. The old rhythm tries to return too quickly, and you hold it back. A hand accustomed to one matrix can betray another. It may lower the screw at the old speed. It may use the old wax height. It may lift too soon. You remind yourself with every impression: warm, spread, lower, hold, lift, inspect, cool, record. After 6 sound impressions, the custodian permits the matrix to remain under your custody for the night's work. He closes the delivery box, now empty, and ties the grey cloth around it again. The box leaves lighter than it came. The room keeps the metal. That is how responsibility moves from one office to another, not by speech alone, by an object remaining on a bench, by a line in a book, by a key in a pocket. The afternoon has shortened while you were learning the new die. The window glass is beginning to darken at the corners. Vienna's low sky has turned from grey to pewter. The lamps in the corridor are being lit one by one. A lamplighter from the building staff passes the door carrying a taper, and the small flame bends as he walks. He does not enter. He has his own route, his own quiet sequence. Bracket, wick, flame, next bracket. Every building is kept alive by such repeating hands. Emil trims the seal room lamp and turns the shade so the light falls across the press bed. You do not want glare. The light must lie low enough to show the rim of the wax, but not so hard that it hides a flaw in brightness. A seal is easiest to judge when the shadow inside the letters is soft. Too much light makes everything look sharp. Too little light makes a poor impression seem kinder than it is. Emil moves the lamp half a palm to the left, and the bench settles into a better evening shape. The provisional matrix waits in its rest, no longer strange, but not yet familiar. You can feel the room learning around it. The old motions remain, but each one has acquired a small caution. The wax is warmed longer. The ribbon is flattened more firmly. The screw is lowered with a slower hand, and every finished seal is held to the lamp before it is allowed to cool in the stack. By 4 o'clock, the first evening dispatch lists begin arriving from the offices. They are not the documents themselves yet, only lists of what the departments hope to send before the courier bags close. Hope is always larger than the pouch. The railway office wants corrected certificates sent east. The military office wants supply permissions sent to depots that cannot wait for new printed forms. The provincial desk wants appointments held in the afternoon to be released if their wording has been changed. The court office sends no list yet. That silence tells you more than a note would. Court forms bearing old styles and ciphers will not be repaired quickly. They will sit in a higher room tonight, perhaps under heavier lamps, while senior men decide which phrases may remain and which must be struck out. Your work is not to decide those phrases. Your work is to know when the phrase has become ready for wax. Emil copies the evening list onto a rough sheet, using columns for department, seal, ribbon, and courier time. He does not write beautifully, but he writes clearly. Clear writing is kinder than beautiful writing in a working room. A clerk in another century may forgive plain letters. He may not forgive an elegant confusion. You stand beside him and place a small mark beside each item needing the provisional matrix. There are more marks than expected. That is the evening's shape revealing itself. The new die is no longer an exception. It is becoming the center of the room. The stove must be steadier now, because the provisional matrix has already shown its dislike of half-warmed wax. You open the little iron door and move the coals with the poker. The sound is low and grainy, like gravel under a cartwheel. A thin orange glow deepens beneath the ash. You add one small piece of coal, not two. Too hot a stove makes wax impatient. It shines too soon, slumps too quickly, and strings under the knife. The best heat is a patient heat. It reaches the wax slowly and stays where it is asked to stay. Emil sets the fresh wax sticks farther from the stove than he would have in the morning. He has learned the difference between warming for old habits and warming for the new matrix. That pleases you in a quiet way. A day of change can make a careless assistant worse. It can also make a careful assistant grow older in a few hours. The next bundle arrives from provincial administration with corrected wording. The messenger holds it with both hands, as if the papers are fragile from having been returned once already. He says the department has revised the authority line and requests dispatch by the early evening courier. He says it politely. He also says it with the voice of someone repeating another man's urgency. You take the bundle and read the docket. The correction is written in dark ink, still fresh enough to shine slightly where the last word thickens. The old phrase has been replaced. The new wording refers to the continuing authority of the office under the new sovereign's accession. The phrasing is careful. It is also a little crowded, because the clerk has fitted new words into a space printed for old ones. This happens often in offices during transition. Paper stock does not vanish because a reign ends. Forms are crossed, amended, stamped, overtyped, reworded, and made to serve until printers catch up. You check the ribbon tag. Here the next difficulty appears. The documents were prepared for the old seal spacing. The slits are placed wider apart, and the ribbon crossing sits too low for the provisional matrix. If you press as they are, the new seal will catch the upper ribbon but miss the lower fold. The impression may look crooked. Worse, it may not lock the tag properly. You hold the first paper under the lamp and turn it slightly. Emil sees the problem before you speak. He points to the gap beneath the crossing. You nod. A seal that is almost seated is not seated. The messenger watches your faces, and his shoulders fall a little. He knows without understanding the details that time has been lost. You tell him the papers can be sealed, but not as prepared. The tags must be removed and rethreaded. He asks whether the seal might simply be placed lower. It is a reasonable question from outside the bench. You show him the lower margin. The seal placed lower would cover part of the official note and leave the ribbon crossing weak. A receiving clerk, seeing that, might ask why Vienna had sealed in such a manner on the very day of transition. A crooked seal can invite a straight question. Straight questions travel back slowly. The messenger understands enough and stops asking. You write rethread before sealing on the docket slip in pencil. Then you decide the order. The early evening courier is close. There are 9 corrected provincial documents in the bundle. All 9 cannot be properly rethreaded, sealed, cooled, checked, entered, and tied before the pouch closes. But perhaps 3 can. You choose the 3 with destinations farthest from Vienna, where missing tonight's train would cost the most time. 1 goes toward Galicia, 1 toward Bukovina, 1 toward Dalmatian administration by way of rail and further carriage. The nearer destinations can wait for the later bag. This is not favoritism, it is routing. A seal room, at night, must think like a map. Emil begins removing the old ribbons from the 3 chosen papers. He uses the point of the bone folder, not the knife, because the knife may cut the paper fibers near the slit. The ribbon resists where wax residue from an earlier preparation has stiffened it. He eases it back, thread by thread. You cut new ribbon lengths, each one a little longer than the old spacing requires. The new matrix needs a broader crossing. It must sit centered beneath the crown and shield, not crowd the lettering. The ribbon itself is narrow silk, though not of fine decorative quality. Government ribbon is chosen for consistency more than beauty. It must pass through slits without shedding too much fiber. It must lie flat under wax. It must hold its color enough that an office can recognize the category of paper. You thread the first new ribbon. The paper lifts slightly under your fingers, and the old fold line tries to guide the strip back into its former path. Paper remembers pressure. You smooth it with the bone folder and create a new crossing. a little higher, a little tighter. The correction is simple, but the hands must persuade the materials. Emile rethreads the second while you prepare wax for the first. You have him pause and inspect the crossing, not with a glance, with the pad of his finger, lightly feeling whether one layer rides over the other. He feels a small twist, almost nothing. Almost nothing becomes a gap under the dye. He lifts the ribbon, straightens it, and presses again. Better. The lamp burns steadily. The stove holds. The wax softens to the new point. You lay the first mound low and broad, as the afternoon tests taught you. The provisional matrix is placed in the press. The screw descends. You hold for 5 breaths. When the die lifts, the crown is full and the lower lettering is clean. The seal sits exactly over the new ribbon crossing. Good. Not said loudly, just good. Emile records the document number while the wax cools on the board. You move to the second, then the third. The early courier arrives while the third impression is still dulling from gloss to firmness. He is carrying 2 leather bags, one large, one narrow, and his coat smells faintly of wet wool and street fog. He looks first at the outgoing shelf, then at the clock. Couriers live by closing times. Pressmen live by where the wax has set. These 2 kinds of time meet every evening, and neither fully yields to the other. You tell him 3 provincial documents will go now, and the remainder later. He takes the news without complaint, but he checks the list carefully. The old empire has trained many men to distrust vague assurances. He wants document numbers. He wants destinations. He wants whether the others are held for correction or delayed in sealing. You give him the exact phrase, retagging required for provisional matrix. He writes it on his dispatch sheet slowly enough that the words can be read by someone else. The 3 cooled documents are inspected once more. No crack, no smear, ribbon seated. Docket matched. Register line complete. Only then do they go into the narrow bag. The courier pulls the strap through the buckle and seals the bag with his own transit closure. His seal is not yours. It belongs to dispatch, not authorization. The difference matters. One seal gives a document authority, another proves a bag was not opened between desks. Offices are layered with such proofs. A letter may bear a signature, an office seal, a packet tie, a courier closure, a receiving stamp, and a register number. Each mark answers a different doubt. The courier leaves, and the room does not follow him in thought for long. There are still 6 corrected provincial papers waiting. Their old ribbon spacing lies across them like a small repeated error. You and Emile begin the slower remedy. Old ribbon removed, new ribbon cut, slits checked, crossing raised, wax warmed, press lowered, seal cooled, register entered. The sequence is longer now, but it is honest. Forcing the old preparation would have saved minutes and spent confidence. You work through the 6 in steady order. The second has a paper slit that has torn slightly from the earlier ribbon. You stop and reinforce it with a small parchment guard approved for such repairs. The guard is plain, nearly invisible once placed under the fold. It spreads the strain so the ribbon does not pull through the weakened paper. Emile asks whether the repair must be noted. You say yes if it touches the sealing structure. He writes, repaired tag slit before sealing in the remarks column. A note like that may never be read, but if the paper arrives with a question, the answer is already waiting. By 5 o'clock, the corridor outside has lost the daytime shuffle and gained the evening echo. Fewer people walk past. Their steps sound more separate. A man carrying ledgers moves slowly, as if the books are heavier than his arms expected. Some doors are closed that usually remain open. The news of the emperor's death has spread through the building now, not as rumor, but as settled fact. There is no wailing in the corridors. This is a chancery. Grief here wears ink, restraint, and revised forms. Portraits in higher rooms may be draped later. Memorial notices may be printed. Ceremonial orders may pass through other offices. But in the seal room, the sign of mourning is a locked drawer and a new line of authority. You take a moment to flex your fingers. The thumb has a little red stain near the nail from wax dust. though you have wiped your hands often. The skin smells faintly of resin. Presswork leaves its scent on a person. Not strongly, like a tannery or a stable, just enough that on the tram home, if you were to lift your hand near your face, you might smell the day again. Wax, oil, paper, cold iron. Emile brings in the next batch from the side table. These are military supply permissions, corrected only by docket instruction, not by rewriting the forms themselves. The military office has sent a covering note, signed by a senior clerk, authorizing use of the ministry seal on old printed stock until revised forms are delivered. The note is practical and slightly hurried. Its ink is darker at the end, where the pen was pressed harder. You read it twice. Then you attach it to the top of the batch with a narrow clip, not a pin. Pins make holes that later look like missing attachments. Clips can be removed. Even fasteners have their customs. These papers need wax, not wafers, because they will travel to depots and storage offices where packets may be handled roughly. A wax seal on a ribbon tag will show interference more clearly than a wafer on a fold. The supplies named in the documents are ordinary, almost dull: boot leather, lantern oil, medical gauze, spare bolts for wagons, flour sacks, coal allotments. Nothing in the list sounds imperial. Yet armies, railways, hospitals, and kitchens depend on such plain nouns. The seal does not make the leather stronger or the flour whiter. It makes the permission recognizable as valid. That is enough. You and Emile divide the work. He prepares ribbons and reads document numbers. You handle the wax and press. After every fifth document, you stop and clean the matrix face. The new die is holding tiny red crumbs near the crown divisions, not enough to ruin an impression, but enough to warn you. Sharp new engraving catches residue differently from worn metal. An old die releases wax like a seasoned mold. A new die must be watched. You use the soft cloth folded over a narrow wooden point, never pressing hard. The cloth lifts little red traces from the recesses. Each time, the next impression improves. This is how the first day of a tool becomes part of its future handling. Tomorrow, you will remember to clean after 5. Perhaps later, after the edges wear slightly, it will be after 10. Tools and hands negotiate over time. Near 5:30, a junior messenger brings a covered cup of coffee from the clerk's room. It has been sent by Herr Kohler, he says, perhaps as apology, perhaps as thanks. Perhaps because someone remembered that the seal room has been working since before dawn. The coffee is thin and no longer hot, but it is welcome. You let Emile drink first. He protests because you are senior. You tell him he is younger and more likely to grow careless when hungry. That ends the matter. He smiles a little into the cup. The steam is weak, but it fogs his upper lip. When your turn comes, you take 3 slow swallows. The coffee tastes of chicory and metal. It warms the throat more than the body. Still, there is comfort in being remembered by another office. A seal room can feel like a hinge no one sees until it squeaks. Tonight, people are hearing the hinge. The military permissions take nearly an hour. The last 3 are delayed by damp ribbon. The roll from which they were cut must have sat too close to an outer wall, and the fibers feel limp. Damp ribbon behaves badly under wax. It can steam slightly or cool the lower bed unevenly, leaving a shallow impression in the center. You set the 3 strips near the stove, not on it, and wait. Waiting for ribbon to dry feels foolish to anyone who has not seen a seal fail from wet cloth. You have seen it, so you wait. Emile uses the time to sharpen the wax knife on a fine stone. The motion is soft. Forward, lift. Forward, lift. He wipes the blade on cloth and tests it on a spoiled wax edge. A clean cut tells him the edge is ready. The room is not idle. It is preparing its next correctness. When the ribbon has lost its damp feel, the final military papers are sealed. All pass inspection. You enter the batch completion time as 6:20 in the evening. The number sits in the ledger like any other time, though the day has not been like any other day. The evening courier's second bag closes at 6:30. You carry the finished military batch yourself to the outgoing shelf, because the stack is thick and the seals must not knock against one another. Fresh wax can be hard on the surface and still tender at the base. If pressed too soon under another bundle, it may flatten at one edge. So each sealed document rests with a small guard sheet between it and the next. The guard sheets are cut from clean waste paper. They are not official, but they protect official work. Much of office craft lies in such humble protections. A cloth cover, a guard sheet, a pencil note, a ribbon dried before use. Things no decree names, yet without them decrees travel poorly. The courier arrives again, this time with an assistant. The bags are fuller. The corridor smells of damp leather and outdoor air each time the door opens. The courier reads from his list. You answer from the outgoing shelf. Emile reads the register numbers. The assistant repeats the destinations softly as he packs. The four voices create a low pattern. Railway, Galicia, entered, packed. Military supply, Moravia depot, entered, packed. Provincial appointment. Bukovina, entered, packed. Each document leaves the room only after being matched in speech and writing. This may seem slow. It is faster than searching tomorrow for a paper sent under the wrong cover. When the bag is nearly closed, the courier asks whether any court correspondence is ready. You say no, awaiting revised authority. He writes it down. No one argues. The strap is pulled tight. The brass buckle knocks once against the table edge. The courier seals the pouch and lifts it. The bag is heavy enough that he shifts it onto his hip before stepping into the hall. The door closes behind him. The room becomes suddenly smaller, not emptier, exactly, just relieved of several provinces at once. You and Emile stand without speaking for a moment. The stove ticks. The lamp gives a tiny hiss at the wick. The provisional matrix rests with red traces in its lines. Then another knock comes, softer than the courier's. It is the railway clerk from earlier, carrying a small bundle tied with blue tape. He apologizes before placing it down. You ask what has changed. He says corrected routing tables have arrived from the afternoon office, and 3 certificates must go in the late-night dispatch if possible. If possible is the phrase that keeps offices humane. It gives the receiving worker room to tell the truth. You untie the bundle. The railway forms are clean. The authority line is through the ministry, not the withdrawn imperial seal. That means they can still be handled under the smaller ministry matrix if the docket agrees. You ask the railway clerk to wait near the side table because these 3 may yet make the late bag. He nods and folds his hands behind his back, careful not to touch the bench. The certificates are thinner than the military papers, and they smell faintly of fresh ink. The routing tables have been copied in a tighter hand than usual, with station names squeezed along the margin. You recognize Przemysl, Lemberg, Czernowitz, and smaller junctions that seem to exist in the office mostly as ink. Each name is a place where someone will read a number, compare a wagon, and open a gate. The railway clerk has brought corrected slips to attach beneath the seals. That is where the difficulty lies. The slips are narrow, and their pasted edges are not fully dry. If sealed too soon, the pressure may shift them, and the correction could sit crooked under the wax. You touch one corner with the back of your finger, not the tip. It lifts slightly. The paste has not taken. The clerk sees it, and his face tightens. You do not scold him. He has carried what he was given. Paste dries by its own clock, just as wax does. You place the 3 certificates on the sideboard, near the lamp but away from the stove. Warmth may help the paste settle, but heat would curl the paper. Emile brings 2 small glass weights from the cabinet, used for flattening documents without marking them. Their undersides are clean because they are wrapped in cloth when not in use. You set one weight over the corrected slip, then another over the second certificate. The third must wait its turn. The railway clerk asks quietly, "How long?" You say, "As long as the paper asks." It is not an answer he can take back to his office with satisfaction, but it is the only true one. While the paste settles, you turn to the remaining provincial documents from the corrected bundle. They are ready for the later dispatch now, but ready does not mean finished. The new ribbons sit well. The wax impressions have cooled. The register entries are complete, except for final dispatch notes. You examine each one under the lamp, tilting the paper until the raised letters show their shadows. The provisional matrix has done its work, but the room is still learning its smallest faults. On one seal, a speck of wax has lifted at the outer rim. It is no larger than a seed. The impression remains valid, but the rim may catch against another paper in the bag. You trim the raised fleck with the warm edge of the wax knife, not cutting into the seal itself. The red shaving curls away and falls onto the cloth. Emil watches closely. You tell him that trimming is not repair, if the impression remains untouched. Repair changes the thing. Trimming removes what should not have been there. These distinctions may seem small, but small distinctions are the language of the room. The railway paste is still dulling. You test one corner again. This time it holds. You lift the glass weight and inspect the slip. The correction lies flat enough to seal. Because the certificate is a railway paper, it does not require ribbon. A wafer would usually serve, but these corrected slips must be protected from lifting. So the clerk's docket requests a small wax seal at the lower fold, using the ministry matrix. You agree. The wax bed must be smaller than those used for the provisional seal. Too much wax would cover part of the root note. Too little would not grip the slip. You cut a narrow piece, warm it until it bends, and press it into an oval with the knife blade. The smaller ministry die is familiar. It descends more briskly than the new matrix, and the old feel returns to your hand for a moment. The impression is clean, not deep, not grand. Exactly right for a railway correction that must survive a pouch and a receiving desk. The second certificate is sealed the same way. The third has a troublesome corner. The paste at one edge still shines. The railway clerk shifts his weight again but says nothing. You decide to dry it by patience, not by heat. Emil places the glass weight on it, then sets a clean blotting paper over the loose edge. Blotting paper is soft, thick, and thirsty. It takes the extra moisture without dragging the ink if it is lifted gently. You wait through another small interval of work. During that waiting, a messenger from the military office brings a late note asking whether any unused black wax has been opened. You answer, no, and have Emil enter the inquiry on a loose memorandum. The office is checking its mourning materials now. Black-edged papers, black wax, ordered docket slips, and funeral notices will begin to move through the building. They belong to another stream of work, and not all of it will come through your bench tonight. Some mourning notices are printed and folded without wax. Some will receive wafers. Some, more formal, may require black seals under a separate instruction. Until that instruction comes, the black wax remains locked. A color kept unused can be as meaningful as a color used. The third railway certificate finally holds. You seal it with the ministry matrix, cool it, inspect it, and enter the late correction in the register. The railway clerk receives the three papers as if they are warmer than they are. He thanks you once, very softly. Then he hurries toward dispatch. You do not watch him go. The bench has already called your eyes back. By 7 o'clock, the seal room has entered its night shape. The corridor lamps are lit, and their light lies yellow along the stone floor. The windows have become dark mirrors. In them, you can see the bench, the lamp, Emil's bent head, and the small red points of wax on the cooling board. Outside, Vienna is only a few blurred lamps and the faint sound of wheels. Inside, every sound is closer. The scratch of a pen, the click of the wafer box, the dry brush of ribbon drawn through paper, the stove settling and waking, settling and waking. Night work is not merely day work continued. The body changes after long hours. The hands still know their tasks, but the mind must be guarded from easy mistakes. You begin speaking the register entries aloud before sealing each batch. Emil repeats the document numbers back to you. This is slower, it is safer. Late errors often come from silent certainty. A clerk believes he has read the line, a pressman believes he has chosen the right die, an assistant believes the ribbon belongs to the packet before him. So you add sound to sight, department, document number, seal required, wax color, ribbon or wafer, dispatch time. The words become a soft fence around the work. A packet from provincial administration returns with 2 corrected appointments. They had been in the hold tray earlier, and now they carry revised wording signed and initialed. The old printed phrase has been crossed through with a single line, not scratched out. The correction sits above it, in a neat hand. This is the proper way to amend a form that must show its own history. A heavy blot or erasure would raise suspicion. A single line says, "This wording was here," and has been replaced. The new authority line is clear. The provisional matrix is required. The ribbons, however, are still the old lengths. This time, the office has sent extra ribbon with the papers. That small courtesy saves several minutes. It also shows that the lesson has begun to travel beyond the seal room. Someone upstairs now understands that the new die asks for different spacing. You rethread both appointments. Emil warms the wax more slowly than before. He has become careful in a new way. Not timid, careful. There is a difference. Timidity stops the hand. Care guides it. You let him make the first of the 2 impressions under your eye. He reads the docket. He checks the instruction slip. He lays the ribbon, warms the wax, and shapes it low and broad. His first lowering of the screw is slightly uneven. You place 2 fingers near the handle, not taking it from him, only steadying the final turn. The die settles. He holds for 5 breaths. When he lifts, the seal is sound. A small pride passes through his face and is quickly hidden. That is well. The room has no need for display, but it has room for quiet satisfaction. The second appointment you seal yourself, because its paper is thicker and the ribbon crossing lies over a fold. The wax must be pressed with a little more patience to find the lower layer. It does. The impression cools cleanly. Both appointments enter the late dispatch stack. At 7:30, the first late courier sends word that the bags will remain open another quarter hour. That is unusual. It means other offices are still gathering corrected papers. The delay is both mercy and pressure. You can finish more, but only if you do not let the extra time tempt the hand into haste. A quarter hour is not a gift if it produces a bad seal. You choose only the papers already fully prepared. No new questionable batch is opened. The decision disappoints a messenger waiting near the door with the court folder. He says the secretary hoped it might go tonight. You ask whether the revised authority has been confirmed in writing. He looks down. It has not. Then it cannot go. He does not argue. Perhaps he has argued in other rooms already and has used up the part of himself that expected victory. You place the court folder in the hold tray. It sits there with several others, bearing old headings, old phrases, and fresh uncertainty. Court correspondence is often more delicate than supply paper. Its language carries rank, style, precedence, and memory. Changing a line in such a document is not like changing a wagon route. It may require the attention of men whose whole work is the order of words. The seal room waits beneath that work. The courier's quarter hour passes quickly. You add 4 more finished papers to the late stack. Each one is matched, spoken, inspected, and entered. The courier arrives with his assistant, and the room briefly fills with leather, damp wool, and the careful energy of departure. He has removed his hat, but not his gloves. His fingers are cold enough that he flexes them before touching the dispatch list. You place the documents on the side table, not the bench. The bench remains for work. The side table is for transfer. The courier reads the first destination. Emil answers with the register number. You confirm the seal used. The assistant places the paper in the proper inner packet. There are packets within bags, bags within routes, routes within train schedules. The world outside may seem wide and confused, but the dispatch table tries to make it narrow enough to handle. 1 provincial paper is missing from the courier's list. It is present on your shelf. The courier frowns. Emil checks the register. The paper was added after the list came down. The dispatch note from the provincial office is clipped behind the docket, not in front. There is the cause. A small misplacement of paper has made a temporary absence. You unclip the note, show the courier, and he adds the document by number. No irritation is needed. The error has been found before departure. That is enough. The bags close at 8 and 5 in the evening. The courier's own sealing strap is drawn tight. He applies a transit seal with a small hand stamp and a dab of dark wax. His motion is quicker than yours, because his seal proves closure, not authority. Even so, he checks it. Everyone who handles official movement has some version of the same instinct. Mark it, count it, record it. Let the next hand know what has been done. When the courier leaves, the seal room is not empty of work, but it is empty of urgency for a moment. You let that moment stand. Emile lowers his shoulders. You remove the provisional matrix from the press and clean it before the residue hardens. The cloth comes away with red streaks along its fold. Tiny crumbs have gathered again near the crown and the upper shield. You work them free with patience. The new matrix has sealed enough papers now to teach its first warning. It takes wax cleanly, but keeps wax stubbornly. Tomorrow, that will change how you arrange the bench. A narrow cleaning cloth will stay beside it, the wax will be warmed softer, the cooling board will be placed closer, so seals are inspected before stack pressure touches them. This is how a room adapts. Not by proclamation, by moving objects half a handspan. The stove is fed again, but lightly. There may still be a late-night dispatch. There will certainly be accounting. You send Emile to fetch fresh water for the basin. He returns with the pail held low, careful not to splash near the papers. The water smells of metal and winter. You wash your fingers slowly. The red wax dust loosens from the creases beside the nails. It clouds the water faintly, then sinks. A pressman's hands cannot be perfectly clean during work. They can only be clean enough at each stage. Clean enough for paper, clean enough for wax, clean enough for the ledger. The distinction matters less to the eye than to the conscience. At 8:15, bread arrives from the clerk's room, wrapped in a sheet of yesterday's notice paper. No one knows who sent it. Perhaps Kohler again. Perhaps the railway clerk. Perhaps a messenger who saw the lamp still burning. It is dark bread, cut thick, with a small piece of sausage folded beside it. You and Emil eat in turns. The bread is dense and a little sour. The sausage tastes of pepper and smoke. For a few minutes the room is a workplace and a shelter. The old matrix remains locked. The new one rests on cloth. The ledgers lie open, waiting. The work has not become easier, but it has become known. That is often the mercy of a difficult day. By the time the last food is put away, the building has quieted further. The higher offices still burn lamps, but fewer footsteps pass the door. Voices come rarely now, and when they do, they are low. A clerk in the registry coughs behind the wall. Somewhere, a bucket is set down by a cleaner with a hollow ring. The night staff has begun its own round. They will sweep ash, trim lamps, lock inner doors, and empty baskets that contain nothing secret. Even a chancery at night is full of labor. Not all of it uses ink. A late instruction arrives at 9. It concerns morning notices, but not the black wax. For tonight, printed notices are to be folded, registered, and dispatched under ordinary office closure unless otherwise specified. This means the black wax remains in its drawer. You enter the instruction into the temporary memorandum book and sign the receipt. The messenger waits while you read it twice. He is tired enough that his eyelids lower between blinks. You give him the signed receipt, and he tucks it into his folder. He turns to leave, then pauses. He asks whether the old imperial seal was truly locked away. The question is not official. It is human. You answer simply, yes, at 2:10 in the afternoon, with witnesses. He nods, and the fact seems to settle him more than a speech would have. There are times when a precise hour is kinder than a grand phrase. The remaining night work divides itself into 3 kinds. There are documents still to seal for a possible late pouch. There are held papers that must be listed for morning review. And there are records that must be reconciled before anyone sleeps. You begin with the documents that can still move. Only 5 remain eligible. 2 railway corrections, 1 military permission, Two provincial authorizations under the provisional matrix. Each is clear, each has written instruction, each has a place in the register. The work proceeds slowly because the room is tired. You let no one hurry it. The railway corrections receive small ministry wax seals. The military permission needs a ribbon tag, red wax, and the ministry matrix. The two provincial authorizations need the provisional matrix and the new wider ribbon crossing. Emile prepares the first provincial ribbon correctly without being told. He cuts it a finger's width longer than the old habit. He threads it higher. He flattens the crossing until it lies like a woven mark rather than a knot. You see the day's lesson living in his hands. You let him seal it. This time, you do not touch the handle. He lowers the screw slowly. The wax receives the dye. He holds. He lifts. The impression is good. A tiny air pocket sits outside the rim, not within the seal. Acceptable. He looks at you. You say the word, acceptable. His shoulders ease. The second provincial authorization you seal after cleaning the dye, it prints more cleanly than the first. This confirms what you suspected. Residue gathers quickly in the fresh crown divisions. The note for tomorrow becomes firmer in your mind. Clean after every few impressions until wear teaches otherwise. At 9:40, a final courier messenger appears to collect whatever can be sent to the station office. He is not the full courier, only the runner who brings late packets to the dispatch room. His boots are muddy at the edges. He has been outside more than once. You give him the 5 documents, each wrapped with guard sheets and tied in a small packet. He signs the transfer sheet with a cramped hand. The pen scratches hard enough to catch on the paper fibers. He apologizes. You tell him it is legible. That is what matters. He leaves with the packet tucked inside his coat to keep it from the damp hall air. Now production is nearly done. Nearly is not done. The remaining papers still have to be accounted for because a document not sealed tonight must not vanish into the morning's confusion. You draw the hold tray to the center of the bench. It is heavier than it should be. Court correspondence. Appointments awaiting rewording. Military forms needing fresh authority. Provincial papers with obsolete headings. A few uncertain items whose instruction slips have not yet returned. They are all unfinished in different ways. If they remain only as a pile, they will become tomorrow's trouble. So they must be named. Emile brings the holding ledger, a separate book with fewer columns but wider lines. Held papers require explanation, not merely count. A finished seal can be recorded in a narrow space. A delay often needs more room. You open the ledger to a clean page. The paper is thick, slightly rough, and cool under your palm. At the top, you write the date, the 21st of November, 1916. Then you draw a line beneath the date with a ruler. The ruler is nicked along one edge, so you use the other. Small imperfections travel if allowed. You begin with the held court folder, because its red tape is fraying and could loosen overnight. You write the department name, the document count, the reason for holding, and the instructions still required. Emile reads from the docket, and you compare each number with the paper itself. One document is missing its covering slip. For a moment, the room grows very still again. A missing covering slip is not the same as a missing document, but it can become one by morning. You lift the top papers, check beneath the blotter, and look beside the wafer box. Nothing. Emile checks the side table where messengers left bundles through the evening. Then he finds it, folded under the grey cloth that came around the provisional matrix box. It must have slid there when the custodian opened the package. The slip is harmless now, but its little journey proves the point. Paper moves when hands are tired. You place it back with its folder and enter the hold reason in ink, awaiting revised authority. Not sealed, not dispatched. The words are plain, but they make a fence around the paper. You work down the pile slowly. Appointments needing rewording. Military forms awaiting confirmation. Provincial papers with obsolete heading. Court correspondence suspended. Each line receives its reason. Each reason receives initials. The held stack becomes smaller in the tray, but larger in the book. That is the way of records. They take loose uncertainty, and turn it into arranged ink. Near 10 and 15, Emil adds the counts aloud. Sealed under ministry matrix. Sealed under provisional matrix. Wafer closures. Returned for rewording. Held for morning review. The totals should meet the morning's received bundles, plus the papers brought later, minus the outgoing dispatches. They almost do. There is one impression missing from the seal count. Not a document missing. An impression. That is a quieter problem, and sometimes a harder one. You go back to the register, your finger follows the ruled columns line by line through the day's changes. Morning railway, military supply, appointments corrected. Withdrawal at 2 and 10, provisional received at 3 and 10. First use at 3 and 40. Evening dispatch, late railway corrections. The gap is there, not as an error, but as a narrow blank between two kinds of authority. A paper was entered before sealing, then stopped when the withdrawal instruction arrived. The register line remains half made. No impression was completed. No seal should be counted. You remember the active paper moved aside, its wax never pressed, its ribbon uncovered for a moment in the strange silence after the instruction. You find it now in the hold tray, with its docket marked Review. The half entry must be explained. If left alone, it will look tomorrow like a forgotten act. You dip the pen once more. In the remarks column, you write that the entry was opened before withdrawal notice. No impression made. Paper transferred to hold for revised authority. You add the hour. You initial it. Then you have Emil initial beside you because he witnessed the stop. The missing impression is no longer missing. It has become a non-event properly recorded. That may seem like a small triumph. Tonight, it is enough. You close the sealing register halfway, then open it again to check the final page. There, across the afternoon, the hand of the day changes. The old seal appears in the morning lines. Then the withdrawal note. Then the provisional seal begins. Between them lies a small space where the pen did not hurry. Future clerks may see that space. They may not know the feel of the room when the cabinet key turned. They may not know the damp wool of the couriers, or the way the new matrix held wax near the crown, but they will know that the office stopped, witnessed, entered, and resumed. That is what the ledger can carry. Not the whole day, only the part that must survive. The cleaning begins after the last count agrees. You remove the provisional matrix from its rest and hold it under the lamp. Its face is no longer bright in the same way. A day's work has softened it. There are red traces in the deeper cuts, especially near the crown and shield. You clean them with the folded cloth and the wooden point, turning the die so the light enters each hollow. No metal scrapes metal. No haste makes a scar. When the cloth comes away clean, you place the matrix on fresh linen, ready for the morning. Beside it, you set the written restriction copied onto a small card. Restricted use. Confirm category before impression. Warm wax longer. Clean frequently. Those are not grand words. They are the words that will keep tomorrow from beginning in confusion. Emil gathers the ribbon scraps. Long clean pieces go back into the salvage envelope for practice. Frayed pieces go into waste. Wax shavings from official work go into the reject cup, not the fresh wax box. Spoiled wafers are counted and marked destroyed. Nothing with an official impression, even a failed one, is tossed loosely into a basket. A rejected seal is still a shape of authority. It must be made harmless. You take the spoiled wax impressions from the reject dish and soften them over the stove just enough to crush their designs. The crests slump. The lettering folds into itself. The wax becomes red matter again without readable command. Only then does it go into the waste tin. It is a practical act, and also a little solemn. Marks should not wander after they have failed. The stove is opened for the last time. The coal has fallen into a low orange bed. You do not feed it. You spread the ash slightly so the heat will fade without smoke. The room begins to cool almost at once. Paper tightens in the chill. The window glass darkens to a black mirror. In it, you see two figures at the bench, one older, one younger, both bent over the remains of a day. Emil washes the wax knife, dries it, and places it in its groove. The bone folder goes beside the ribbon drawer. The wafer box is closed. The sponge is wrung out and set where it can dry. The glass weights are wrapped in cloth. The small card shims beneath the old press are left in place, but labeled. Temporary bed adjustment. Inspection requested. A tool can rest while still needing repair. The old imperial matrix remains in the locked drawer. You do not open it again. There is no need to prove its absence twice. Still, before closing the room, you place your hand on the cabinet front and feel the faint coolness of the wood. Behind it, the metal waits in darkness, not destroyed, not displayed, only withdrawn. It holds the shape of a reign that is ended, and will perhaps be examined someday by archivists with clean gloves and quiet voices. For now, it is simply not to be used. That is its new duty. The custody book receives the last entry. Cabinet checked. Keys present. Provisional matrix retained for morning work. Withdrawn matrix secured. You write the time as 11:05 at night. Emil signs below you. His signature is slower than in the morning. Tiredness makes it wider. You blot the ink carefully, then leave the page open until the shine is gone. A wet signature is a fragile thing. It looks finished before it is safe to touch. Many things are like that. Seals, paste, instructions, grief. You close the books one by one. The sealing register, the custody book, the holding ledger, the equipment book. Each cover makes a soft sound against the page block. The bench clears in stages until only the morning's necessary things remain. Fresh wax, clean cloth, the provisional matrix, the register placed beside it. You set them not as display, but as readiness. Tomorrow will not begin from nothing. It will begin from this arranged remainder. Emil puts on his cap and waits by the door while you take the keys. The lamp is turned low. The room changes color. Red wax becomes brown in the dimness. Brass loses its shine. The press looks less like a machine and more like furniture left in a sleeping house. You look once at the cooling board. It is empty now. All impressions have either gone out into the city, been recorded as held, or been made unreadable. The day has passed through the room and left its order behind. Outside the door, the corridor is colder. Your footsteps and Emil's move together for a few paces, then separate where he turns toward the lower stair. He says goodnight quietly. You answer the same way. No more is needed. The key ring rests in your palm with its familiar weight. It is the same weight it had before dawn, yet it is carried more than metal today. At the threshold, you turn back and lock the seal room. The bolt slides into place. Inside, the stove fades. The cloths lie folded. The new matrix waits beside the open work of tomorrow. The old one sleeps behind its label, still shaped for a hand that must not use it. And somewhere beyond the dark windows, trains move through the night with papers in their bags, each seal cooling into history as it travels.